Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try to do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it normally runs for about 3 hours. So I apologize that I was not here last week. I had some unexpected things come up that involved laser hair removal and deer. So yeah, not the laser hair removal wasn't on the deer, just for clarification's sake. But uh, yes. Anyways, so Ella May and Elle, welcome, welcome. Thank you guys for being here. How's everybody's week going so far? Mary is here. Welcome. What do I have on my sleeve? I have ink. I do. I have a cute little chihuahua who is sleeping in my lap. I think you guys can see part of him. Let's see here. Yeah. You gonna say hello? You gonna say hello? No, you're sleeping. Okay, I love you too. Miss Susan, Canadian girl, Julia, Jamie, Mickey, speculator, welcome, welcome. Ella May says, I'm doing okay. Could be better, just a little under the weather. Ah, bummer. Do you have allergies? There's been something going around lately. I'm not sure if it's allergies or like a little cold. Judy is here. Oh, Ella May says, I've also got a chihuahua. He's a deer chihuahua. And Amy says, hello. Yes. Oh, thank you for your kisses, Roman. Yes, thank you. Oh, glad you're here. Trez ID says, yay, I made it. Hello, everyone. So we're glad you made it too. I am broadcasting from my bed because I've been moving a lot of stuff over here, and my desk is an absolute mess, and I don't even want to look at that area. I need to unpack and figure everything out. Ugh, messy, messy. Cheryl says she's new today. Well, welcome. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Kamami says bonsoir. Bonsoir. Todd, Nikki. Dora says, hi, Dana. It's been a long time. It has been. It's good to see you. Let's see. Ella May asks, do some narcissists not ask you questions? I have had people that identify or that are concerned, I should say, that they are narcissists or maybe kind of on that path that ask questions. So we get all kinds of questions in here. This support time is normally meant for people that have been the targets of any form of abuse and are on their path to healing. So I try to not but I try to not give too much time or attention on this platform, to abusive people, because that's not what this is here. That's not what we're here for. People are saying my voice sounds different, and Dora asks if I have a cold. Oh no! And Sandra says, "Are you okay? Your poor voice." I think, I wonder if it's just my voice is different because I've got this dog sitting on my lap. I don't know. I don't think my voice. I don't know what's wrong with my voice now. You guys have me freaked out. Yes, Julia, thank you. She says book club tomorrow. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Book club is tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be discussing the book True Refuge by Tara Brock. and interesting. It's all about mindfulness and everything. Okay, there's something wrong with my microphone. Oh, let me see. I wonder. Is that any better? Mickey says you sound like a robot. Well, that is not good. Something is off with your voice settings. Is that any different? Zachary, hello. Tyler says, I've been separated from a possible covert narcissist for 6 months now. Why do I catch myself feeling angry still sometime? Why do I catch myself feeling angry still anytime I have to have conversations with her? Is that normal to feel like a jerk almost? Yes. You know, when I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Somebody was talking about Phoebe and Friends, trying to read and think at the same time. Okay, let me scroll up here. Okay, so back to your question, Tyler. You know, when we have been hurt in some sort of way, and after we're aware of it, we realize, wow, I really went through a lot. I put up with a lot from this person. They really mistreated me. Those feelings of anger are completely normal. And they are oftentimes they can last for quite a while. That anger that you're feeling, it's anger a lot of the time, it's the emotion of self-protection. So when we are angry at somebody who's done us wrong, that anger there is meant to serve a purpose of um, kind of getting us into the motion of taking some sort of protective action, like setting a boundary, distancing ourselves from this person or whatnot. It's difficult when you still have to have a conversation with that person and have them in your life, because it's that continual reminder of just it's continually feeling re-victimized, and there's a lot of that unprocessed pain that hasn't been worked through yet. Uh, ha! Flavor Pro says, I think the gain on the mic got turned down a bit. Yes. Okay. There's something. Is that better? People are saying I sound. my voice is like really, really unnaturally low. I had was messing with the gain because I had to record something else. So I don't know. I'll have to go back and listen to this. Congratulations. LMA says, I am 7.5 months, no contact with my narcissistic ex. It will be 8 months on the 1st of next month. Wonderful. Congratulations. That's huge. And Shantae says, my anxiety disappeared after my ex deployed. What does this mean? Well, it could have been, okay, hold on. Let me scroll up here. It could have been if your anxiety was there because you were continually concerned about what is this person going to do? When am I going to see them? What are they going to say? You know, am I going to accidentally bump into them around town? These kinds of things, which is very understandable when somebody's caused you harm, to fear all of these things, to just have that kind of running in the back of your mind. So, um, you know, if that person's deployed, then you know for certain you know where they are. So that can kind of give you a sense of peace of, I know that they're far away and I know how long they're going to be there. And I know that they're not going to be able to contact me, or I'm not going to at least be able to run into them around town. That would be my guess. with that. Nikki says, "Oh, you have this Sylvia Brown voice." She says, "I can tolerate it though. Like I've been smoking 2 packs a day." Oh my gosh. Yes, I will have to pay attention to my microphone settings. Ah. Ava says, "I split with my ex at the end of January, and he has since hoovered twice, tricking me into talking to him and feeling sorry for him. And since he last did this to me, I am like addicted to him again. I feel like there is a cord between us, and I am not free yet." Yes. So what you're describing, Ava, is um, frequently known as a trauma bond. And trauma bonds, I would encourage you to look to Google them because there's kind of a lot to it, but it's basically we bond to people in two types of ways, through healthy bonding or through traumatic bonding. When we bond with a person in a healthy way, it's based off of positive things, shared interests, mutual support, um, caring, compassion. There's this level of sincerity there, a level of appreciation there for both people involved, versus trauma bonding, which is a bond that's formed through the highs and lows. So it's a type of intermittent reinforcement, if you're familiar with that term. So, which is behavioral conditioning. So we have the highs of the good times, or even just the highs of things are normal, like the relationship's going fine, and then something dramatically happens, and there's some sort of abuse that occurs, and then, oh no, now we're taken to this really low point of, oh no, I don't know if this relationship's going to continue, and I'm in this desperate scramble now to kind of get in their good graces. And then this person works overtime to get this other person to approve of them, and then things are fine, and then boom, nope, all of a sudden more disapproval. Probably the best way I can describe this is if you've ever seen any episode with Gordon Ramsay. This is exactly what's going on there, where all of these other chefs are just in this, a lot of them, um, or when they used to do restaurant makeovers and stuff, are desperate for his approval. And in part, it's because, the guy really knows what he's talking about. He's a food expert and a restaurant expert. But a lot of it, the reason there's so many highs and lows is because you have to really earn his approval. And he's very verbally and emotionally abusive to people if they don't have his approval. So all of this push-pull kind of stuff, these highs and lows, cause a lot of anxiety in a person. And for someone who's not aware of what's going on, that this is really not healthy, they take all of this personally. So, and then we can unintentionally give our power to people like this, where we say, oh, we live and die by their approval, basically. And we internalize everything. So if they don't like something we did, if they say, I don't know, oh, you just can't take a joke, or I don't like your hair, I don't like your makeup, we take that as gospel truth. Oh, there's something wrong with my sense of humor or my hair or my makeup, instead of thinking like maybe we just have different opinions about what's funny or hairstyles or makeup. So when we're in that people-pleasing scramble mode, it's just to always keep that relationship together. It's these highs and lows. The highs come with dopamine and oftentimes oxytocin. The lows come with a lot of cortisol and adrenaline. And it's just this chemical cocktail that our brain is soaking in when a person's in these trauma bonds. It's the same dynamic between a pimp and a sex worker, between a cult leader and a cult member. It's why people have a hard time leaving cults. no matter how horrific they were treated or whatever they went through. um, it's the anxiety of, oh no, this relationship's going to end, and the comfort of, oh thank goodness it's going to continue. It really can mess with a person. So really the best way to break trauma bonds is to really go no contact, and to keep yourself busy, and to try to meet those needs, whatever that relationship is meeting for you, the attention, the affection, in positive ways. I'm a big fan of, meetup.com groups, or if you've got, friends or hobbies in your area, really pour yourself into that, at least for the first like 30 to 60 days. And that way you're busy doing things that you enjoy, and you're not so preoccupied with the kind of the void that you're feeling is now there in your life. Kevin, yeah, I agree. He says, I don't like watching those abuse as entertainment cooking shows. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't either. That's why I like what is it? The Great British Bake Off. I love that show so much. Mickey says, what attachment style would a narcissist have? Would it be anxious, avoidant? It would probably fall more under it. I guess it would probably depend, but it would probably fall more either anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. So there is no, because there really isn't a healthy self there to begin with. They're in attachment, and I guess it depends too on what kind of, kind of where along the spectrum. It definitely wouldn't be secure attachment. It would, I think more often than not, it tends to be avoidant with narcissists, but it could be anxious avoidant as well. My guess would be it's more avoidant because they're so defensive. They have all of that fight mechanism engaged, that it's the result of that is a person just is uninterested or unable to effectively attach to other people. Because for narcissists, it's just all about them all of the time. And everybody else is just disposable, and there's no real remorse or guilt or empathy or any of that. There's just nothing, there's no deep connection there with them ever. So let's see. Let me scroll down here. Zachary says, hey, Dana, I have a question. Someone doesn't necessarily have to be pathological to sabotage you or be vindictive, right? Are these behaviors ever normal? Like if somebody's jealous. You're right, right. So these behaviors can be normal. It's like with personality disordered stuff, it's pervasive and persistent behavior. Like this is how this person tends to, and has for a long-standing period of time, dealt with stress or relationships or such in their life. But it's all of this behavior, it's within the realm of normal human behavior. And it's just the degree and frequency that's the problem, because they're unable to really shift out of engaging with people in any other way. Or if they do engage with them, it's not in a different way. It's not sincere. It's just another layer to their game, because there's no authentic self there. This is why, but you bring up a great point, Zachary, about sabotaging or vindictive behaviors. What's the most important is for us to be able to tell when we're being mistreated. So we don't need to figure out if a person's a narcissist or a sociopath or a psychopath or what have you. We just need to figure out, how am I being treated by this person? Am I being treated with disdain, contempt, hostility? What is going on here? Is this person mistreating me? And if they are, then that's all we need to know. then the next part of that is figuring out how do we respond to that. And that's going to be responding with some type of boundary. Either we're going to assert ourselves, or we're going to start getting some distance from them, or some combination of the two. But crazy making is crazy making is crazy making, by whatever name you want to call it. Mickey says that she also loves the Great British Bake Off and new season. I did not know that. New season starts on Netflix on Friday. Oh, that's so exciting. I love that show so much. It's my happy place. It's like everything good and right with the world. Let's see here. That's another really great point, Zachary. He says attachment patterns can fluctuate throughout the relationship. They are contextual. A person could have an avoidant attachment to their parent and an anxious attachment with a partner. Yes. And it can change. A person can have, let's say, a secure attachment as a child. This is, I think, what is confusing for a lot of people. They're like, I don't get it. I don't get what's wrong with me. I grew up in a really loving home. I had wonderful parents. They were supportive. This really great Norman Rockwell childhood, basically securely attached, and got into this really bad relationship. But let's say it only even lasted like 6 weeks. But I think for any of us that have ever been with a pathological person, 6 weeks is still a lot of time and can do a lot of damage. But they might think, well, I've only been with this person for 6 weeks, and I'm terrified of getting hurt again, and I can't date, and I feel like I self-sabotage, and I'm doing all of these things, and they're so confused. And so it's very common that after a person has gone through any type of verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, that their attachment style, they tend to be, and I think this is just part of trauma and moving through that trauma, is they swing from being secure over more towards the anxious or avoidant. And they might kind of bounce back and forth between, maybe they're anxious for a little while, or maybe they're avoidant at first for a while. They just don't want to date. They don't want to leave the house, these kinds of things. And then they move more into anxious. This kind of stuff goes hand in hand with PTSD. These types of like hypervigilance, or wanting to isolate, or a loss of interest in things, these kinds of things. But it can, if you look at it from like a way that we relate to others, it's also very different. There's a change after a person has been abused. I was reading an article about this the other day that I found so interesting, and it makes complete sense, but it was talking about attachment styles. And for those who are avoidant, and I should preface this with saying it's for people who are interested in working on their attachment styles, because not everybody is. A person can be happily avoidant, or, or they're anxious, but they just don't want to work on that attachment style. That's very, very, very common. So if a person realizes, let's say they're in therapy, they're like, you know what? Yeah, I realized I have this avoidant personality or attachment style, and I push people away, and I just avoid relationships and all of this stuff, or I'm anxious and I'm terrified that this person's going to leave me or hurt me, and I just have a really hard time relaxing. I'm always waiting for them to leave. So with avoidant personalities, what they were saying was asking different types of questions. There's some sort of questionnaire out there. It's like 36 questions that help people to bond. And but really, I think any type of questions for couples, or kind of getting to know you type questions, right? Like what what would your ideal life look like? Or basically, who are you, kind of a thing. How do you handle stress? What do you do when you get angry? How do you cope? When was the last time you got upset and what happened? Or what are some things you like to do for fun? Really getting to know people. Those types of questions for a person who has an avoidant attachment style, who wants to work on that, that can really help to bring about connection and getting them to open up. Because a lot of times they don't know how to open up. So if the other person takes the lead and works with them, that can be really, really helpful. Uh, Anxious attachment styles can benefit from being around a secure, stable person. So, and that person can be a therapist, a life coach, a good friend, a partner, somebody who is able to give them the reassurance that they need. That, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm with you. I'm here to support you. I'm on your side. I'm on your team. Uh, let's talk about these things. It's okay for you to get upset with me. It's okay for us to disagree. I'm still going to be here. So let's talk about these things. It's okay. And letting the other person realize we can work through things. So that can help tremendously, to just have another person act as more of a stabilizing force. Um, let's see here. Gosh, okay, people are saying my voice still sounds funny. That is so strange. I just wish I knew what that was about. Jennifer asks, are histrionic people damaging to others, or are they more damaging to themselves? It depends on how their behavior manifests. It's been, and I apologize too that my screen is so shaky. Oh, Dana. I guess it just depends. It's been my experience with histrionic people that it's exhausting because they're so attention seeking all of the time, and that it's just kind of draining for other people that are around that. As far as being, I think it just depends on how they go about being attention seeking. Would be, how are they damaging to themselves or other people? If it's just this continual, it just depends, I guess. If they're, let's say, hypersexual, if they're dressed very sexual, they make up stories, or they really embellish different things. It can be very difficult to be friends with somebody who's histrionic like that. Because it's just never enough, and it's always exhausting, and it's always got to be about them. It can definitely be hurtful to them because they tend to misread situations often, where they think that relationships are a lot deeper than they are. So if anybody gives them like a crumb of like a compliment, or shows any glimmer of interest, they often will misread that and think that these friendships are a lot deeper, or relationships are a lot deeper than they really are. And so then they wind up getting perpetually hurt. So there's a wide variety of ways that kind of stuff comes across. Hun Warrior says, hey, Dana, I miss your live chats with Angie. Are you guys going to do it again or not? Yes, we are. And I apologize we didn't do one this week, but we will be doing them. The plan is to do them from here on out. Absolutely. George, or he's from Portugal. So I'm not sure if I guess that would be, was it Jorge? I'm not sure. I apologize. Says, hey, Dana, have you watched Dirty John from Netflix? If so, what are your thoughts on it? I'm watching from Portugal. I love your channel. I have not watched it. They had actually contacted me about a year ago to see about advertising on my channel. And I looked at them, what they did, briefly. And from what I remember, I just found it very upsetting and off-putting. I didn't spend that much time on it, so I don't remember, but I just thought this is not the direction that I want my channel to go, so I didn't go along with it. I haven't watched it. So maybe I should, because I know people have been talking about it a lot. Have you seen it? And if so, what did you think about it? I will mention a fantastic show that I discovered here the other day. People are talking about Flavor Pro mentions that they watch cooking videos and knitting videos to keep a happier mind. There is a great channel, YouTube channel I came across the other day from a friend had recommended it. It's called Craftsman, and it's CRAFSMAN. So no T in that. And it's family friendly. It's for all ages. It's the guy is his voice is just wonderful. It's very soothing, and he does crafts, except he is like a puppet character, which sounds like it would be for children, but it's not. His humor is he has very dry humor, and um it's really entertaining, and you can watch him make different things, and it's great. I just highly recommend it. So that's something to add to the list if you guys are looking for just checking out some completely off topic things that are where you're able to just kind of rest and unwind. Oh, I was thinking about you, Rob. I am so sorry. I moved a lot of my stuff over, and I was just wondering when you were wanting to meet up. If you're in town again, let me know. He was saying I waved across the Port Huron Bridge back on August 19th. I am so sorry that I wasn't able to connect with you, but I would love to do that in the future. Um, I guess my voice still sounds off. I don't know. I don't know. I apologize. And that's a good point, Jack. He says it seems that men and women must respond to trauma fairly differently. I don't think it's just a cultural gender role thing. I would be curious to know what studies have been done about that. I, part of me wonders if there's even been any studies about the differences on with how men and women respond to trauma. Because I bet you're right that they do respond fairly differently. And I also agree that it could also be more than just a cultural or gender role thing. It would be interesting if somebody were to do that, to do a research about that. And what would be really helpful is different approaches. Are different therapeutic approaches more helpful for women or more helpful for men? And if so, why? And is there any way that we can, uh, you know, any kind of, I don't know, like different markers that we could use to figure out what treatment approaches would be useful for somebody? Like if they displayed a certain set of characteristics or behavior traits, okay, then maybe we could try, this one approach with therapy. Because let's just say like this one person went through trauma and we realize, okay, they're in more of a flight response. So we're going to try these types of therapies on them versus this other person who's stuck in more of a fight response or, a freeze response, that we could try these different therapies on them. So like really getting clear on what defense that they're defaulting into. It was interesting. I was listening to a video the other day about the polyvagal theory. Um, kind of with responses to stress and trauma, and how it impacted healing. And one of the things that they were saying was that it's not just fight, flight, or freeze, but that there's this other response that's basically, excuse me, that's basically where a person just goes into complete collapse. So, for example, you probably have heard me joke about it. My response to stress is I have the response of a fainting goat. Like it's like I play dead. I pass out, my body just shuts down and I sleep. And I hate it so much because I don't get things done. And then the more I don't get done, the more stressed out I get. And the more I just keep falling into that collapse state. So it was kind of reassuring in a way to realize that that's actually a very valid response to stress. And um, there's things that can actually be done to address that. So that state of collapse is part of it. Okay, so let me scroll up here. Zachary says, I knew a family member I was convinced has histrionic traits. She would cry at the drop of a hat for what felt like attention. It always seemed superficial, like fake crying. Yeah, it's histrionic tends to be, it's very theatrical, and oftentimes tends to be very overly sexual. So for women in particular, at least here in the United States, it tends to be more very attention seeking as far as dress, just, really low cut. They're trying to get everybody's attention. So um, kind of starting, they know how to push buttons. They know how to um, kind of rile people up sometimes. But there is a lot of that fakeness, that theatrics. It's draining. It's just really, really draining. So, Jennifer was saying it's hard for me to tell the difference between overt narcissism and histrionic. Yeah. And there's so much overlap between a lot of it. Each personality disorder has defining characteristics to it. So, for example, borderline personality disorder, it's more marked by the fear of abandonment is one of like the primary characteristics of it. Whereas, so you might have a lot of the same kind of behaviors with histrionic and narcissistic, but narcissistic isn't that fear of abandonment. It's more about control. And so narcissism, it's more, what would be well, maybe antisocial is a better way to describe some of what we talk about. Antisocial personality, it's about dominance, basically dominance and deceit are two of the main traits with that. So it's this pervasive level of like manipulation. It's all about power and control. They'll pull you back into this relationship with all kinds of promises, but then, cheat on you multiple times, or then they do something to end the relationship. It's all about them all of the time. And narcissists can be very much that way as well. Narcissists tend to need a lot of validation, whereas antisocial personality disorder does not. Antisocial, they don't really care what you think about them, whereas narcissists have such a fragile ego that they need other people to continually think that they're the best, that they're amazing, that they're special and superior. Histrionic tends to be more just attention seeking and dramatic and theatrical. Yeah. That's one of the challenges with these things, because these traits can manifest and show themselves in a wide variety of ways. So especially with borderline personality disorder. So you might have 10 different people that have that diagnosis, and it comes across in 10 very different ways, which is a problem. So you might have some people that have borderline personality disorder, and they're they come across as very reactive and impulsive and difficult and demanding and manipulative. And then you might have other people who are also reactive, but who are, continually in a series of relationships with other people. They're continually getting hurt. They have this huge fear of abandonment. They stay in abusive relationships like multiple times, and they have kind of no real sense of self, no real sense of self. Like they just don't really know who they are. But that's, it's a big difference between those two. Um, let's see here. And I agree. Vampire Slayer says, yeah, and borderlines can be similar to histrionic and vice versa. I've, again, it totally just depends on the way that particular clinician is, what signs and symptoms they're seeing in a person at that time. A lot of people, when they see anything outside of the ordinary, tend to very quickly jump to borderline personality disorder. Oh, this person has purple hair. Oh, they have a lot of tattoos. Oh, they have, really wild makeup. They don't dress like the rest of us. Okay, then very quickly it's like, oh, that's borderline. When maybe it's not, right? Like maybe they just, yes, their look isn't uh, traditional, but uh, I don't know. I don't like how appearance is so kind of lumped into that. Okay, let's see here. Um, let's see. And that's a really other great point. Interested says, I used to cry at the drop of a hat, but I think that was postpartum depression, but I don't know. I guess some people might interpret it as histrionic or even borderline. LOL. Yes. This is why, especially after major life events, I mean, childbirth being one, um, divorce, well, we're talking about, I guess we're talking about different things here. When there's hormonal fluctuations at play, yes, your emotions are going to be all over the board. Really common after, around puberty, around that time of the month for women, around childbirth. And after, with postpartum stuff, I mean, this can go on for years if it goes untreated. Then there's situational stressors that can make a person react in a way that they don't normally. So you have grief and loss issues, the death of a loved one, a divorce, a major move, a friendship that suddenly ended that they didn't want to end, the death of a pet, these kinds of things that can make a person, that can contribute a lot to just emotional stressor kind of things. And especially after, and I think what trips so many people up, many clinicians included, is after a person goes through abuse, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, oftentimes the person that's experienced it isn't aware that they experienced abuse of any kind. They just know that they feel completely dysregulated, and they can't sleep. They have a hard time trusting other people. They're angry. They're scared. They're still missing the other person. They just feel like a mess, an emotional mess. And they're very confused by this. And if a clinician's not familiar with the more covert forms of abuse, and many aren't, then odds are they're going to misread what's going on with that person. And they're not going to realize that this is all very normal signs and symptoms that a person has been traumatized emotionally. And that's something that that person needs to work through. I think a lot of us survivors of this tend to feel too like, well, but this happened a long time ago, so I should be over it. But I think it was Zachary who was saying earlier, our body remembers. So trauma it's largely stored in the body, and moving into healing involves processing this trauma. And this is kind of where you know, mental health and psychology in general, we're just really, I feel like, on the cusp of even just beginning to understand all of this. So a lot of the most effective treatments for trauma right now have to do with mind body therapy, have to do with exercise, trauma yoga, walking meditations, different grounding exercises, doing things to bring a person back into their body and to experience these emotions and move them move the process through. I was listening to another audiobook the other day. It was by Peter Levine. I don't know if it's on the book club list, but we should definitely put it on there if it's not. And I forget which book it was. It might have been Waking the, I'm looking at, I've got one of his books on my bookshelf. It might have been Waking the Tiger, about healing trauma. I'd have to go look, but I think that might have been it because he talked about a tiger in the book. But it was basically that what happens a lot with people, especially with anxiety disorders, is they start feeling anxious and then they try to calm themselves down. And his whole theory is we need to do the exact opposite. We need to allow ourselves to go through that whole fight or flight feeling until there's that resolution of that feeling. So when we start feeling really anxious, because it's a physiological thing, to then go, either visualize that we're being chased by a tiger because you're all of a sudden in fight or flight mode, visualize that and imagine yourself running as fast as you can and then getting yourself to safety and then experiencing what it feels like to run, all of your muscles working, your heart's pumping, feeling all of that adrenaline going through your system, and then being able to somehow, climb a tree and now you're safe. Or that if like you hop a wall and now that tiger can't get to you, now you're safe. Something happens to where you're safe. And then then experiencing your body, what it feels like to have your breathing come down again and have your breathing regulate and your pulse regulate and you stop sweating and you're able to find that normal again. What was interesting, and Peter Levine was saying in his book that a lot of the work he's done, a person didn't even need to revisit the traumas that made them anxious initially. It was more of experiencing those same feelings. It was like this unprocessed emotions were what was stuck in the body. So if a person had some sort of, let's say they had an experience, they had a car accident. And so now that anytime the thought of, maybe they're just anxious in general, but they're pretty sure it stems back to being in that car accident. If they can go through these different exercises of running from a tiger, even though it's not directly related to what they experience, but it's the same emotions, it's that fight or flight and then safety, that can help to process those unprocessed emotions and get them back to a place of kind of stasis. Okay, let me. Healing hopeful survivor. Ooh, hold on, sorry, I'm just getting more comfortable here. It says, "Hi Dana, when you first started speaking out against NPD, did you find that because you weren't a psychologist, et cetera, that people dismissed you, called you a non-expert, even though you lived it? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it wasn't so much that I was speaking out against NPD. It was more about speaking about the effects of the damage being around narcissistic and sociopathic people, and the effects of emotional and verbal and psychological abuse. And what really made me mad was, I had been a psychiatric nurse. I'd worked at a domestic violence shelter for a long period of time. Like, it's not like I, don't know what I'm talking about. I do. So that was one of them that was really kind of minimizing and invalidating and very frustrating. But at the same time, and it's also why I decided to finish up my master's degree in counseling, because I just was tired of, I feel like this subject is so important that I didn't want my lack of, I guess, like official credentials to hinder what I was trying to say or the impact that I feel like I could hopefully make in this lifetime. But yeah, even still, even with being, a psychiatric nurse, even with experiencing this myself, even working with a domestic violence agency, even though I have a huge support group and I am in the trenches every single day, and I have been for years, you know, worked with tens of thousands of people within the support group. Even still, all of that's been very minimized and was very frustrating and invalidating. But yeah. Uh, so I guess if you're speaking out about this and you're getting that from others, I think it also depends on how you're approaching this topic. So my goal with the topic is not, even after I finish my master's, I don't ever plan on coming at it like I'm an expert in this, because I just um I don't like the term, I guess, because I feel like this is such uncharted territory that we're all students of this. And um and it's important that we stay students of this and not just think we're an expert, because most experts just stop learning because they feel like they're an expert and they don't need to. So I guess if you're going to talk about this topic, I would just encourage you to come from the place of, these are talking about your experience, and not talking about it from like a clinical point of view. I really try to stay not clinical, because then it's not even about credentials or anything like that. It's more about what's relevant to other people, because I found that if the conversation stays too clinical, then people get confused and they want to focus on uh, specifics, like basically like trying to diagnose other people, which it's interesting and I get that, but it's more important that we're aware of kind of what problematic behavior is for each person, for you, what that looks like, and knowing when you're being treated in a way that you're not comfortable with, and how to handle that when that happens. That's what's most important. Figuring out if this person is a, covert, altruistic narcissist, or they have borderline features. It's interesting, but it's really not terribly helpful. Like, what's more helpful is to understand when you're being mistreated, and being able to validate yourself so that you can take some sort of corrective action. Mm. Healing Hopeful says, a newspaper did a write-up for World Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day. Many people attacked it because I wasn't a psychologist. I was called abusive for labeling people. Yeah, I think a lot of it's just how it comes across. One of the points that I make with narcissistic abuse in general is a person doesn't have to be a narcissist in order to be narcissistically abusive. Narcissist Narcissistic abuse is a term that was given to people that whose basically selfishness and selfish disregard for others, the impacts of that. So this is a term that comes from Alice Miller. I want to say she came up with this in like this probably the 70s, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, when she began studying children of parents that were just not emotionally available. It was all about them all of the time and the effects that it had on their children. So a person doesn't have to be a full out narcissist in order to be narcissistically abusive. The effects of narcissistic abuse tend to be all of the other forms of abuse: verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual, financial, spiritual, you name it. The vast majority of the time, parents who, or people in general, who are their behavior is so traumatizing to somebody else, tend to be either mentally ill, they have untreated mental illness. There's some sort of reason that person's not able to engage emotionally or connect emotionally. So it might be untreated mental illness. It could be that they have their own personality disorder going on, which, if a parent is a narcissist or has antisocial personality disorder, yeah, their children are going to grow up, and with a parent who's not emotionally available, because that's when you've got a sociopath as a parent, they don't, it's just about them. And even if they're a decent parent, their behavior is still damaging because if they're hurting other people. Like, for example, this is an extreme example, but extreme, and I would say rare, but the, oh gosh, who was it? He was a serial killer. It might have been the BTK killer. I'm drawing a blank right now. His daughter recently wrote a book about having a serial killer as a father and how she was so traumatized by, she didn't have any clue. She said her parents had like a regular marriage. Her dad was a pretty decent father, and she was just horrified when she found out that he was a serial killer, and has PTSD from that, knowing that she, lived in a house with a person who was a serial killer, which would do it. So that's rare. Most people with antisocial personality disorder don't compartmentalize their behavior to such a degree where they live such different lives, where they're able to play the part of like great family man, and they're also, living this double life as a murderer, or like the Bill Cosbys of the world. Most of them tend to come across as chaotic, kind of across the board, and they're selfish, and their lack of regard for others is apparent in a wide variety of ways. Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Flavor Pro says, yeah, most killers are not Dexter. Right. I think a good show, if anybody's interested in that, is the show Mindhunter. I feel like that's I just started season 2 of it, but season 1 I feel is the most well done show I've ever seen that has to do with uh, uh, kind of examining behavior and the way that kind of criminality, the power and control behind it, the way that manifests itself. So that's a great show, because a lot of the other shows, they make it seem, I don't know, it's tends to not be very realistic. Okay, let me scroll up here. Yes, and that's a good way to do it. Flavor Pro says, I personally try not to label people as an NPD or BPD or other types of diagnosis. I just aim for manipulative, abusive traits, as anyone can have those. Yes, and so that's another point. That's one of the reasons I also focus on behavior, because it's not debatable. If we start talking about diagnosis, then people, they get it just derails the whole conversation, and there's this huge debate about, BPD and weaponizing mental health, and what about NPD, and how do you know, but you haven't, you're not a mental health clinician, and if you are a mental health clinician, you haven't met with them, so you can't really say, and da 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 da. People lose their mind, like they get so defensive. It's kind of fascinating to me, because you don't see this level of backlash with anything else. Like, you could call a person, anxious or obsessive compulsive or, depressed or anything else. Nobody bats an eye. But if you refer to somebody as, this person's a complete psycho or, a sociopath, people freak out and want to defend that kind of behavior. It's just bizarre. It's bizarre to me. But yeah, I focus on, and there's a difference if you call a person a sociopath versus calling their behavior sociopathic. People tend to be more okay with if you're talking about the behavior instead of the person, because people get caught up on that. Well, but how do we know for sure that they're a sociopath? And, and then that just gets the whole conversation off the rails. But if you talk about, well, this behavior is really sociopathic. This person has a pervasive lack of regard for others. There's chronic disregard. There's no empathy, or there's majorly lacking empathy. There's no seeming remorse. There can be aggressive behavior. Just, these kinds of things. People tend to not argue with that. So. C asks, can menopause cause a woman to present with narcissistic personality disorder traits or symptoms? I mean, potentially. I guess it depends on what traits we're talking about, but hormone shifts can really cause personality changes. Even blood glucose levels. So if a person, their blood sugar's low, they can really be very irritable and aggressive, and I know for me personally, I'm a very different person when my blood sugar's low, and and I'm at the point now where I see it. But when I was in high school, I just was really, really moody. And it was because I ate terribly. I basically wouldn't eat breakfast in the morning, and I would have a Diet Coke and a brownie for lunch. Just garbage. I just ate garbage, and it wasn't on a predictable basis. So some people, but anyways, it's interesting now when you can kind of see that stuff within yourself, and you're able to slow it down and not become as reactive. But yeah, hormone shifts of all kinds can cause people to act, in ways that aren't normally them. Irritability, that kind of stuff is common with menopause. But again, it doesn't make it okay. So I don't know who the person is in the life that's, problematic behavior is problematic behavior. So it's okay to have boundaries with somebody, regardless of what's going on with them. Let's see. Jennifer says, when my mom couldn't take care of me and my sister anymore because she's bipolar, my dad took custody. He took care of us so well, always bringing me to ballet class, always making me healthy meals, always making sure we did our homework, always making sure we cleaned our room, etc. However, there was the one major thing. He was manipulating me into letting him sexually abuse me for years, which is why it's so hard to come to terms with it being labeled as abuse. But I know now that it is, but that distortion of parental duties really confused me. Even to this day, I grapple with it. I can imagine. I can imagine, and that makes perfect sense because I think we all have this idea of what an abusive or neglectful parent is. But if they're seemingly a great parent in a lot of ways, except for this one major thing over here, it's very difficult to reconcile these two sides of them. So I would imagine a lot of people really struggle with making sense of that have gone through something like that. You know, sort of like I often wonder about Bill Cosby's wife and what she's going through. You know, because here she was married to Bill Cosby for decades, 40, 50 years, and really thought he came across as, well, supposedly came across as this loving, devoted, wonderful man who was that way to quite a few people. All of the Cosby kids from the TV show that worked with him adored him. He was wonderful to them. But, here he was out drugging and raping. So it's hard to reconcile that. Same with Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was in a relationship with a woman who had a child, and they all got along famously. But yet here he was out viciously attacking and killing other women. So it's hard to reconcile. How can they be so good in some ways and so horrible in other ways? It's just disturbed character. Let's see here. Oh, that's interesting. Zachary says, I become timid when I don't sleep well. Huh. That's interesting. Does anybody else experience that? I'd have to think. I don't know if I've ever experienced that. I just would be curious if that's how unique of a thing is that, if other people have experienced that as well. Okay, let's. What the L says, Dana, not to beat a dead horse, but look up an interview with Kat Von D. Totally sounds like your voice today, just for laughs. That's funny. I will do that. Yeah, I do not know. I don't I don't know. I hope it's not my voice. I hope it's the microphone. That's so funny. Let's see. Yeah, I know, it's interesting, right? Trinity says, I always wonder why these serial killers don't kill their own wives, but go killing all of these women. Yeah, it's it's you know, who's to say? It could have been that was their stress relief. So instead of arguing with their spouse or uh, you know, what have you, they just bottled all that up and took it out on other people. Or it was that kind of weird kind of virgin horror paradox that some people have, where it's sort of like, okay, well, this is my wife and she's different from all these other women. These other women, they're the problem. They're what's wrong with women in general, and then taking it out on them. Mm. Yeah, that's another good example. Zachary's talking about Chris Watts. Yeah. Jennifer was saying she's been, that's interesting, Jennifer. You have so much insight. I really hope that you know that. Uh, so many of the comments that you make are just really, like, just really profound and show a huge level of self awareness. But she says, lately I've been in therapy. I've been having issues with if my identity is tied around my father or if I'm really me, because I have so many similar interests. Yes, I will be curious to hear kind of what you find with that and how you kind of go about um, kind of untangling the two. And I would be curious to know if I guess how you feel about those similar interests. You know, are those things that you truly do enjoy, or, kind of what your thoughts are? Jennifer, well, Jack. Okay, Jack says, I'm getting the impression that your father felt like sexually abusing you was a form of care, warped and wrong as I think that is. I don't think I disagree. I agree and I disagree with that, Jack. I think I agree with it in the sense that I think that's what he was convincing himself that it was, so he wouldn't have guilt about it. Because if he truly didn't think that there was something wrong about it, he wouldn't have done all of the crying and the guilt and um, the game playing of getting Jennifer to then comfort him and becoming like um, a manipulated participant in it. So I think he did a lot of mental gymnastics to convince himself that his behavior wasn't that bad, or it was okay, or that it's very sick and twisted. But he knew what he was doing was wrong, because if he didn't, he wouldn't have gone to those lengths to to cry and try to get her to comfort him. It's just very twisted. That's my 2 cents anyhow. Okay, let's see. Zachary says, this is Dana robot version ASMR. Uh, mm, Ricky mentions about serial killers. He says, I think their wives were nagging them so hard that it drove them to kill. I don't know the different dynamics with all of the different cases. Um, with Ted Bundy, he seemed to have a really great relationship with his girlfriend, and she was very much in love with him. So I don't think it was her nagging. Well, and I think he'd been killing people before he ever met her. But if you watch the documentary on him, it was more of it, he developed this massive ego injury in college. He dated this, well, I think he grew up feeling less than. He grew up poor and was always kind of awkward and was teased a lot. And then when he was in college, he dated this one woman who was very attractive and had a lot of money. And then I think she broke up with him, and that just really brought him back down to feeling less than. And so a lot of kind of the gist of the documentary, a lot of it was he, because he was murdering women um, that all were about the same age as that one girlfriend from college. So it was just him just getting all of that rage and that ego injury out on other people. So um, a lot of times it's more about issues with their parents that makes a person tend to snap from. But I don't know. There's a lot to do with how a person's raised and kind of both the nature and nurture component. And then sometimes I think there is just that ego injury that a person can suffer. And sometimes it looks like, well, that can't possibly be it, because we all go through stuff, we all experience rejection and embarrassing moments, and get a wounded ego or what have you, but we don't then go forward and kill. So it's sort of like, well, how unstable was that person before this happened, that they weren't able to cultivate or draw upon any resiliency. Instead, they just went straight into becoming very defensive and attacking and aggressive. Mickey says, I'm still shook over the Chris Watts story. It haunts me. Yes. Yes, I agree. It's absolutely horrible. Hmm. And that's a very valid point. Nikki says, Bundy used his girlfriend to appear normal, which was part of his manipulation. Yes. Mm, Jennifer says, even when I came out about the abuse, I broke down hard, and he was talking to my sister over the phone at the same time and asked her why I was crying so much. She didn't understand because he said he was the one with the problem. So, yeah, obviously he has a lot of blind spots, but it's still hard for me to think that he was purposely trying to hurt me. I don't know if he might not have been purposefully trying to hurt you, but his actions were hurtful to you. If anything, he was trying to get his own needs met. It was all about him. It wasn't about him trying to hurt you. But that's the problem, because it was all about him doing something, getting his needs met at the expense of you. But yes, it's very common for people, for child molesters, and for anybody that does horrific things, rape, murder, abuse of any kind, to really minimize or deny or try to justify their behavior. So, the fact that he doesn't understand why you were crying because he's the one with the problem really just speaks to his level of narcissism. He just doesn't get it. It was just all about him all of the time. And he doesn't understand how his actions hurt you because there's no empathy there. So yeah, that's a problem. Um, oh, for real. Yeah. Kevin was saying, I've heard the most ridiculous justifications for abuse. The excuses are infinite. Right. And to the mind of an abuser or anybody that has problematic behavior, they feel entitled to act the way that they want to act because it's how they feel in that moment. They're frustrated or and I think we can all relate to this to some degree, right? We, I mean, for me, a common example that I use is going to the grocery store when you're hungry. And if you're anything like me or you're really irritable and everything anybody does that doesn't fall in alignment with what you think that they should be doing is annoying. It's beyond annoying. Oh my gosh, this person has a whole cart full of groceries and they're in the self-checkout lane, or they are writing a check, or they're walking slow, or there's a group of people and they're walking four people in a line, in a straight line, so you can't easily pass them, or their cart is right in the middle of the aisle. All of these things are legitimately annoying, right? When people do this at the grocery store. But that doesn't give a person, it doesn't, just because it's annoying doesn't mean that it's okay to then unload on somebody and to yell at them or to become aggressive or do any of that. But for abusers, they think that the way that they feel is the reality. Well, yeah, I yelled at you because you had your cart in the middle of the aisle. If you didn't have your cart in the middle of the aisle, I wouldn't have yelled at you. But it doesn't work that way. And that's something that they don't understand. So but for them, everything is like that because there's this expectation of how they think that people should act all of the time. And that everybody else should basically be a mind reader. Just like that example of the grocery store, right? Other people are going to be themselves. Like they're going to do what they're going to do. But if we're in that kind of a mood where we're incredibly irritable and we're, at least for me, when my blood sugar's low and I just get in that mood, I really feel I mean, it's terrible to say, but I can watch myself now when these feelings come up and I can almost laugh at them because I just become my inner child just turns into such a brat and I become just difficult and demanding and impatient and ridiculous. But I do my best to not show it because it's not about them. It's about me, right? It's not okay I can feel however I want to feel, but I can't go and terrorize people at the grocery store because of it, right? But abusers, because that feeling is so legitimate and that reason seems so valid. Well, geez, you have your cart right in the middle of the aisle, or you've got 40 items in your cart and you're going through self-checkout, with the 10 item limit. Like, these things are annoying. I wouldn't have yelled at you had you done something different. But we can't, that's not how we handle things. That's not how adults handle things. So, yeah, but they just don't realize that. And it's what's so difficult too, is because there's so many, I think, subconscious expectations of them for their partner and for their children. And so when other people start stepping out of line and start showing their individuality, if there's this expectation that, oh, well, you're my spouse, and so therefore you should think exactly like me. But it's a no-win game. That's why, like, when people talk about, oh, I really, is this person going to go and live happily ever after with the next person? The answer is no, because it's that mindset. They're going to continue to take that with them until they address that. And that's going to take a long time for them to address it, to even come to their awareness, because they just feel so justified and entitled. So if you can imagine that same mindset of that grocery store mindset of, oh my gosh, you should be you shouldn't be doing that because it's annoying me, right? Taking that mindset and then applying it to everybody else in your life. And then thinking that you have no bound, that you feel so entitled to act on your feelings that you feel it's okay to yell and cuss and threaten and kick and hit and spit and do all these things to other people to get them back in a line, because they should just know better. But it's a no-win game. It's like, and this is where these walking on eggshells starts, because then people are trying to anticipate what this person's going to do and what they can do to prevent being abused. Because there's sometimes in situations like that where, there is that kernel of truth. Well, gee, if I didn't leave my cart in the middle of the aisle, maybe that person wouldn't have yelled at me. So maybe I'll do better next time. That's the mentality of people that have been abused, is we tend to internalize it. I'll just do better next time, instead of realizing, yeah, like, I might have left my cart in the aisle. That might have annoyed you, but it's still not okay for you to just unload on me. Life doesn't revolve around you. So chill and just chill and back up, basically. So, but so another example, this kind of stuff at home that causes the walking on eggshells is, let's say every Friday is normally pizza night. Okay. And let's say it's last week where it was really hot and it's a Friday night. And then you're thinking, oh boy, I don't know if I should make pizza. I just got yelled at last week for cooking, making a casserole that went in the oven. And I got yelled at, saying I was stupid for turning on the oven when it was 100 degrees outside. Now the house is roasting, but we have pizza every Friday night. And we normally like the special home cooked kind that goes in the oven. So I'm not sure, like, should I put the pizza in the oven? Are they going to be mad that we don't have pizza? Or are they going to be mad that I turned the oven on? What to do? And there's all of that anxiety. And it just depends on the mood they're in at that moment. So they might come home because they might be excited to have pizza. And then they're upset with, what's the matter with you? We have pizza every Friday night. Why would you think I wouldn't want pizza tonight? And they get upset. Or if they're really hot and they're crabby and they come home and you might have the oven, you're cooking pizza. What's the matter with you? It's 100 degrees outside. I can't believe you have the oven on. I just told you this last week to not turn the oven on, when it's this hot out. It's these no-win situations because you're not a mind reader, and it's anxiety. And even if you are a mind reader, it's just anxiety inducing. Zachary says, can you imagine telling a narcissist life doesn't revolve around you? Just chill, okay? Yeah, that would go over like a lead balloon. Yeah, Flavor Pro says, oh my gosh, Dana, that story is just like my ex. It's a rock and a hard place is what it always felt like. Yep. And that's it. And after these types of relationships, because a lot of people struggle, understandably so, with pinpointing why things were so off. Because if you give somebody that example of the pizza and the oven, let's say that you weren't yelled at, you weren't cussed at, you weren't hit, nothing happened. But it was a series of these kind of no-win situations throughout the relationship. And now that it's over, you find yourself, I have terrible anxiety. I can't sleep. I'm scared to make a decision. I'm scared. I'm just anxious all the time and I don't know why. And oftentimes it's because of that. It's being around a hypercritical person or a person who's just difficult and demanding and fault finding like that. But you got to remember, to a person that's like that, unless they're sadistic and probably more psychopathic, that kind of stuff is not, it's more often than not, I think, subconscious. They're not even aware of the kind of the double blind that they're putting other people in, because they have that expectation of we all have one mind. The way that I see the world is the right way. It's the obvious way. And if you don't see it my way, then there's something wrong with you. It's part of this immature mindset. So this is why when we oftentimes will tell an abusive person, when we call out that behavior and say, well, how am I supposed to know? Or, this is a problem, or you can't just go around yelling at people. That's why they get very defensive, because they have in their mind, they have their own reasons for why they're doing what they're doing, and they feel entitled and justified to treat other people like that. And it's next to impossible to get through to somebody that feels that defensive about their own behavior, which is why it's very difficult for a narcissist, especially, to ever really change. Because in order to be open to change, any one of us, we would have to let our defenses down. We have to be receptive to input, right? So if we're already feeling defensive, because with narcissism, that's their only gear. It's always feeling inferior and insecure and needing that constant validation. They're always defensive. So they don't shift out of that gear. And you add any type of criticism to that, they're functioning at like the red line. Whereas the rest of us that are able to shift in and out of these different gears, we might have these moments with low blood sugar or PMS, or just you just have an off day. I mean, it happens to all of us where we're really defensive, and we can feel it, right? You're like, wow, I just need to go to yoga or go back to bed or something. I'm just in a really foul mood. When we come down and we get out of that defensiveness, then we're able to think more clearly. But when any person is in that fight mode, the logic, critical thinking part of our brain is not there. It's offline. We're dealing more on an emotional, primitive level. So that's why a lot of their comebacks, a lot of their justifications, a lot of everything that they say don't make sense, because they don't make sense. Because it's emotion driven, which ironically, that's what they accuse the rest of us as being. Oh, well, you're so emotional. Because in their mind, their worldview is correct. Everything should be the way that I want it to be. And if you don't see it that way, then there's something wrong with you. You're too emotional, because it can't possibly have anything to do with me. Do you see how skewed that is? And do you see how difficult it would be to get through to a person? And even if you got through to a person on, let's just say that one instance of, okay, you can't leave, you can't yell at people at the grocery store. Let's say you were to fight that battle and you were to eventually get through to them, because they see every single instance is emotionally driven, because it's just that one mind mentality. Whatever lessons they learn from that grocery store experience, it's not going to transfer over to other experiences, because that part of their brain is not engaged. They're in fight mode. So, and then of course, so they're not going to be able to like universally apply the lesson. And if a person, and I just encourage you to put yourself in their shoes for a moment. And I'm not saying to have compassion for this or to feel sorry for them or anything, but I just want you to imagine how difficult it would be. Okay. So if somebody, let's say you learn those lessons from that one experience, and then people, let's say you even really want to change. And then those around you continue to keep pointing out all of the things that you're doing that are hurtful. Pretty soon, that person's going to start feeling attacked, and they're going to feel like, well, hey, I do nothing right, and everything I do is wrong, and I can't win. So then now there's this level of learned helplessness of, well, why even bother? But for many narcissists or people that are more in that fight mode, or not even just that have that dysfunctional behavior, because they're not aware of it, they're starting to feel very attacked, and I mean, they don't have the emotional maturity there. They don't have the level of insight. and they become reactive. And at some point it just becomes, you're just screaming into the wind because you're just on two very, you're just not speaking the same language, basically. So I hope that kind of answered your question a little bit, Abs. Abs that asked, does anything force a narcissist into introspection and change? If they have no supply, is there possibility of this? Yeah, basically, if they have no supply, that's the only possibility, is if that behavior was no longer tolerated. That would force them to grow as people. But like I just said, because growth and change is difficult for all of us, and again, all of us, we all struggle with this, to learn the lessons that we need to learn and like universally apply it, especially if we don't see the connection there. It's like a lot of other people. Let's take this from a different perspective. Let's say people that have been out of abuse for 10, 20 years, right? They've gone through, they've really done a lot of work. They've figured out kind of so many things about themselves. And, they have been able to change their thinking and their behaving and all of these things. But they look at those that are still finding themselves continually repeating this pattern of problematic people in their life. And, and to the person that's got a lot of the stuff figured out, they don't get it, or they're exhausted by it. And they're like, well, gosh, will this person ever change? Will they ever learn to know their worth and to not tolerate being mistreated? And that's what a lot of people wonder about us. So it's, will other people change? Only if there's that level of sincere desire to actually change. But that's the problem with narcissists and antisocial personality, is they don't experience pain from their actions. The vast majority of the time, they experience pain of consequences, but they don't experience, there's no empathy, guilt, or remorse because they're in fight mode. And the only chance of having them grow would be as if other people quit enabling them and allowed them and just cut their supply off. But the problem is the world is a big place. And even if friends and family and their significant other cut off supply, they would just go find other people and they would feel victimized the whole time. Because remember, it's all about them all of the time. So they're going to, and we all do this to some extent, right? So we all tend to remember the things that we do right. So if you're a parent, you've probably noticed this with children, especially if you have adult children or teenagers, where they'll mention something that you've done that they're really upset with, or this really hurt my feelings that you, I don't know, whatever. Whatever. Like you didn't buy them a certain bathing suit for this party that they wanted to go to when they were 10. And they felt they got teased because of what they wore instead. I don't know, just something. And then as a parent, you're like, what are you talking about? Look, this is all of the other things I did for you. And I worked overtime. So you would have, you could take piano lessons. And so I always made it a point to have lunch with you and to pick you up from school. And we spent, an hour every night doing homework, but, you don't seem to remember any of that. You just remember everything I didn't do right. And then that can be so hurtful. With narcissists, it's kind of the same way, but even to a greater extent, where they minimize because they feel entitled and justified. So they feel entitled and justified for any of the hurt that they've caused. They don't feel like that was wrong. It was like, well, you deserved it. You shouldn't have left your cart in the middle of the aisle, right? Well, you should have known better to not skip pizza night, even though it was 100 degrees. We always have pizza on Friday. You should know. So to them, it's not their fault. It's your fault. It's the abuser's mentality of, look at what you made me do. You made me yell at you because you frustrated me, or you acted in a way that I didn't like. So, that's not going to go away anytime soon with them. Let's see here. That's a good point. Nikki says, yeah, they will lie, cheat, and steal, and it's your fault for being so gullible. Yeah, everything is everybody else's fault. It's ridiculous. And if they ever do say that it's their fault, it's generally all a part of another level of manipulation to get you to feel sorry for them or to believe them that this time will be different. It's games. It's all games. Ab says, yeah, thank you so much for the answer. It's really helpful as I've just gone no contact and feel very guilty. It can be really difficult setting boundaries, but it's one of those things where all any of us can do is to communicate our boundaries to other people. And they either respect that or they don't. If other people have these unrealistic expectations for our behavior, or they have really blurred boundaries or non-existent boundaries, we're just like inappropriate boundaries, that's really not workable for the long term. Those are the kind of people that you'd want to have very limited contact with, or just no contact altogether, because it's going to be exhausting. When a person doesn't allow another adult to be who they are, and they still have all of these these expectations that you're, you're who they want you to be, who they think you should be. That just doesn't work. I don't remember. I think it was another video that I watched the other day. I was on a video watching spree. Dr. Gabor Mate. I'm probably not saying his name correctly. I love this man. He is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't seen his stuff on YouTube, I highly recommend it. He was talking about, he summed it up so perfectly, and I've never heard anybody say this so concisely. He was basically talking about the shift that we make when we're, I don't know how to say this. I'm just going to say it. So I hope this doesn't sound judgmental, because I don't mean it to, but it's the shift that we tend to make from immaturity to maturity, where immaturity, like children, there's a certain stage it's normal and appropriate for our development when we're young, where we value attachment over authenticity. So as a child, we're hardwired. We need our caregivers to take care of us because we can't. We don't have a job. We don't have money. We're not tall enough to, make food or drive a car, get around. Like, we need other people to take care of us. So we are hardwired to seek attachment. And we realize the importance of that attachment. I need my caregivers to like me, ideally to love me, so that they take care of me so I can survive. That's this deep biological hardwiring we have in us. It's part of the reason that children will defend a parent until the very end, because it's that deep of a drive in us. The problem with this, if we're so driven for attachment, when we're younger, it's oftentimes at the cost of our authenticity. So we start erasing parts of ourselves in order to keep those attachments alive. So if we really, especially, this is the problem. So when a person has, really controlling, domineering, difficult, demanding parents who where there isn't that level of secure attachment, where you're always on eggshells of, I better act right, or else mom or dad they're going to do silent treatment. They're going to ignore me. They're going to leave me. Their love is very, very conditional. if there's that feeling there, then the child starts behaving in a way that they feel will be most acceptable to their parent. For a lot of people that don't uh, ever experience a secure attachment with their primary caregivers, that that need for attachment continues. Whereas other people, where it's attachment first, then authenticity second. And this is, you can see how this is definitely becomes more of a problem the older we get, the more responsible we are for ourselves. Because if we're still erasing parts of ourselves in order to be to please other people, to be accepted by other people, so that we can keep these attachments going, that's a problem, because the cost of it is who we are. And that leads to anxiety, depression, addiction, alcoholism, suicidal thoughts, all kinds of things. And we don't even realize that this is going on. That's what's so wild. It's such a subconscious thing. So if a person is able to transition more into this, to kind of this second wave, I guess a more mature, I don't want to call it that. That feels a judgment. Coming into more of a sense of self, let's say that. So there comes an age where if those attachment needs are met, the child's feeling secure, they're able to develop into who they are. So then there's a certain point where now they're no longer super driven to get those, to keep those attachments, because they know that they're going to be there. So that need for attachment takes a back seat. And now it's that primary need for authenticity. So it's exploring who you are. This happens, teenagers, preteens, you're trying out different things, your likes and your dislikes, and you're developing your own religious beliefs, or you're questioning things, or your political views, or you're just becoming more of yourself. And there's that whole process of kind of, it's called identity diffusion, where you're just kind of figuring out who you are as a person outside of your parents. Who am I? What do I really think? Jennifer, like what you were talking about. Well, do I really like this? Do I really believe in this? Or is this just because I grew up like this and I just never thought to question it? And so then that drive for authenticity takes over. And if a person's able to successfully transition into that, they get to a place where they value authenticity over those attachments. So they realize, okay, this relationship isn't healthy for me. As these everybody, I think, you just kind of come across a handful of people or more in your life that are just toxic. And there's this continual, kind of sifting and sorting relationships throughout your life where you realize, boy, you know what? My connection to this coworker or to this friend or this person I'm dating, this is no longer healthy for me. And they're more comfortable with setting boundaries and, or limiting contact or just completely ending things, because they're more concerned about peace in their own life and that living an authentic life and being who they are and having other people support that than they are keeping those attachments in place. So it's interesting when we can realize, oh my gosh, that's been the problem, is I was still sitting in this kind of wounded child space where I was still subconsciously so focused on keeping all of these attachments. And I was so afraid. So many people, the result of that is it's this fear of setting boundaries. It's this fear of speaking up for ourselves and saying, hey, that doesn't work for me, or no, I can't do that, or I disagree with you, or somehow not, there's this fear of, if we don't go with the flow, then this person's going to leave me. That's a huge eye-opening thing for a lot of us, of, oh my gosh, I never saw myself that way. We also tend, just like narcissists do, we all tend to see our own behavior in a positive way. So it's sort of like, oh my gosh, I never saw that, going with the flow and being agreeable and being so compassionate and giving people second and 20-second chances, and all of this could ever be a problem. And then we realized, okay, actually, it was a problem because there wasn't more of a balance there. I wasn't making myself a priority. I was keeping these relationships a priority, which meant sacrificing my wants and needs and thoughts and opinions and everything else. So, Abs says, I didn't even know there was such a thing as boundaries until I started to research all of this. I feel pretty stupid about that. Well, this stuff's not taught. And even, where would anybody really pick this up? So ideally, this stuff it's role modeled. But even if it's role modeled, I think for so many of us, it really just it would be much more helpful if it was spelled out. And I will say I've been interested in this kind of stuff for decades. I've taught classes on it. I just, this has just been my passion. It wasn't until I read a Pia Melody book, and I forget which one. It might have been on Facing Codependence last year, I think it was. And she talked about boundaries, and I was blown away by how little I understood about boundaries until I read that book. And it was just this huge light went on. But I really don't feel like this is common knowledge. Again, I think we all have this idea of what boundaries are. And I think most people, if you were to ask them, would say that their boundaries are pretty good. And I think most people would be wrong. But it's because it's not taught. And boundaries, there's a lot having to do with boundaries. It's more than just saying no or even sticking up for ourselves, or it's more than just even having deal breakers. They're very involved. It's just basic, but we can't set boundaries with people until we know we're comfortable enough with being honest enough with ourselves to know when something's uncomfortable for us. We have to start there. We have to know what's uncomfortable for us in order for us to do something about it. So if somebody is, there's the physical boundary. If somebody's standing too close or potentially interacting with you in a way that's not comfortable, or they're touching you in a way that's not comfortable. Here's the other part of this. So a lot of people, especially those who have been abused in any way, shape, or form, this is where they struggle because they get so focused on trying to find out the other person's intention. Well, okay, so my boss, came over and said I was really stressed out and gave me a neck rub. I don't know. I mean, did he or she mean that? Did they mean anything by that? Like, were they flirting with me? Were they hitting on me? Was that inappropriate? Am I making too big of a deal out of it? My ex used to do that, and it was really creepy, and they get all wound up over it. And the reality is, we don't even need to figure out anybody else's intentions. All you need to figure out is what's okay for you. If you don't want somebody touching you in a certain way, or standing overly close to you, or what have you, if that's not okay with you, then it's not okay with you. We don't need to figure out what the other person's intentions are. You setting boundaries isn't about punishing them. It's about holding your ground. It's about keeping peace in your life. So that's a big shift for a lot of people, realizing we don't need to figure out if a person's well-intended or has bad intentions, or if they're, if they are a narcissist, or if they're a creep, or if they meant anything by what they said or what they did. Doesn't matter, because our boundary is our boundary. So yeah, and Dan says, when you have boundaries, you'll be labeled as difficult, and stand your ground and just smile. Yeah, and I will tell you, around the right people, they will really appreciate your boundaries, because they'll realize there's so much peace that comes from honesty. because then they know where they honestly stand with you. And if there's some sort of issue, that you'll bring it up, that you're not going to go gossip to other people in the office, or you're not going to become passive aggressive and start slamming doors and, yelling at the dog or doing this kind of stuff. That if you're frustrated, you're not going to lie to them and say, "Oh, I'm fine, everything's fine." You're going to say, "You know what? Actually, this I just really had a hard time with X, Y, and Z," and um, you're gonna work towards some sort of solution with it. So it's only people who have trouble with understanding boundaries that are not going to be okay with your boundaries. But I tell you, the more you realize that boundaries are necessary for having peace in your life, and the more you get around other people that are able to be open and honest about these things, then the more like it's not even a big deal. It becomes very second nature in a lot of ways, with just stating what you need, and that it's not a big deal, because it's really not. What the L says, "I have trouble with my roommates who push my boundaries. I can't move. So the only way I can defend myself is to stay in my room. I can lay down a boundary, but they don't care." Yeah. And what the L says, "It seems my only option is to eventually move. In the meantime, I have to suffer and I feel this is crap." Yeah. And that's the challenge with boundaries, is a boundary is only as effective as the consequence that it can come with. So continually, if there's no power there, if you can't move out, or you've there's no consequence that can be imposed, and they don't care what you think, then and you've already tried setting this boundary, like, "Hey, please don't please don't drink the orange juice I have in the fridge. I love a cup of orange juice every single morning, and you guys keep drinking it, and I don't have the money to keep buying orange juice, and it just it isn't working for me." And they don't care. They keep drinking your orange juice. Realizing, okay, there's certain things that if they're just not going to change, the only thing to do is then to move out. But I would try to figure out what kind of power you do have. So, for example, this was actually a real situation that I had when I was in college. There was a house, there was 4 of us that lived in a house together. It should have been a reality show. You couldn't have picked 4 more different people to live together under one roof. And my friend Jen, she was such a riot. People were drinking her orange juice, and I think it was her orange juice. Maybe it was her milk. I don't know. It was something she had in the fridge. It wasn't me. Okay. And so one day she just was getting so irritated. So one day she wasn't going to move out. None of us were going to move out. This situation was not getting resolved. She'd already mentioned, you guys, whoever's doing this, stop doing this. So one day we're all sitting in the living room, and she comes out, and I forget what it was, if it was milk or orange juice, brings the jug into the living room, looks at us, spits right into it, shakes it up, and then goes and puts it back in the fridge. And so she just made it very clear, like, she just was going to spit in her juice, and to keep other people from drinking it. And then it was problem solved. So then nobody else was drinking it after that point. So it's kind of being aware of, like, what do you have control over and what don't you have control over? And okay, so Elle says, okay, yeah, the issue here is she doesn't like yelling. And says, "Don't yell at me." And I don't like yelling in general, but she yells at her bird all the time, loud, and it frightens me. So yeah, with that situation, then figuring out, okay, we don't have control. You've already said, "Hey, you please, loud yelling, it's a big trigger for me," but you don't have control over the tone or the level of her voice. So doing what you do have control over, which is distancing yourself from that environment. You could also do some other, kind of like cognitive behavioral things. So, for example, to make the situation as tolerable as possible. So, for example, whenever you hear her yelling at the bird or at you, instead of hearing her voice, visualize. Do you remember the cartoon Peanuts with Charlie Brown and the teacher? Whenever she would talk, it was wah, 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 wah. Visualize that. Some sort of funny noise where it's just, wah, 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 wah. Something that'll kind of put a smile on your face instead. And that'll break the kind of break you out of that moment of her yelling and seeing it as ridiculous. People are saying in the comments, yeah, poor bird. I agree. It makes me sad when people yell at animals. And when people yell in general, it makes me sad. What the L says, ooh, I like this. Yeah, okay. I'll try this. Yeah, the more ridiculous you can make it, I would encourage you to try to have fun with it. The less impactful it will be. So if you can change your perspective of her behavior, because you can't change her behavior, so if you can change your perspective of it, that can sometimes help. Gareth says, I recall living in a house with my friends. We would collect bags of trash and leave them outside a pal's door. So when he opened in the morning, the trash went all over in his room. Oh, those were great days. Oh, yes. Oh, the passive aggressive things we used to do. Yes, I've had roommates that had, thankfully not in my room, but had sacked up dirty dishes. They were tired of, I don't even remember who it was, tired of somebody not doing dishes, and took all of the dirty dishes and put them on that person's bed because they were tired of doing it. It was the other person's turn. I've heard of people throwing out all of the dishes because other people weren't doing them and they just ate off of paper plates. Uh, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, it's just, ay. Yes, I did see that, Mickey. Mickey says, did anyone see the video of the YouTuber abusing her dog? She accidentally uploaded the unedited video. I hate when people hurt animals. Yes, I saw that and I was absolutely livid and disgusted when I saw that. Did you see that there was another YouTuber who had started a thing that said, I will adopt your dog. How much do you let me buy your dog from you? How much do you want for your dog? And I thought that was a really great response to it because she seriously needs to not never own pets or have children. She was I was horrified. I can't even imagine. But did you also see all of her justifications for it? She was totally defending her actions, and a lot of other people in the YouTube comments and stuff were like, oh, this is a first world problem, this isn't even animal abuse, you guys are too sensitive, blah blah blah. It's just wild how people can minimize stuff, and it's like, it's still not okay. Like, yeah, she didn't kick the dog across the room, but did she need to in order for it to be abuse? The answer is no, she didn't. Pam says, yeah, turn her into the Humane Society. I think a lot of people had called about the situation. Yeah, it was disgusting. I really hope that they, I don't know. I hope that there's some sort of consequences. It's really frustrating when, I don't know, when people like that just get by in life. Lou says, thank you, dear Dana. Thanks to you, I've learned so much and could set me free from my abuser. I've been 2 years, no contact. Awesome. Good for you, Lou. Congratulations. And I am so glad that I could be a part, play some sort of part in your healing journey. That's just makes my heart smile. Let's see. Let me scroll down here. Oh yeah, totally. Flavor Pro says, "Oh yeah," and her responses screamed narcissism. It's like Jacqueline Hill and her lipsticks. Total narcissistic response. Yeah, I agree. I don't know why. I think it's because it's so different. It's so much lighter than this stuff, but a lot of the channels I watch on YouTube are very, very random. Some of them are drama channels, and I'll watch some makeup channels, even though I'm obviously not a huge, uh, makeup person. But yeah, the whole Jacqueline Hill thing and her lipsticks, that was wild. Seeing some of these apologies that YouTubers come up with when they've like something's really gone wrong. It's wild that anybody, not only them, but like their PR team, that nobody thought that was a problem. Like it's total lack of accountability and lack of a sincere apology. It's just really, really wild. Yeah, Nikki says it's hard to not get sucked into YouTube drama at times. Yes, I hear you. Flavor Pro says, "Oh, the beauty community and the drama channels are a little bit of a guilty pleasure." Yes, I call it my trash YouTube. I'll tell people, "Okay, I'm going to let you go now. I'm going to go watch my trash YouTube and just unwind." Yes, I love, who do I love? Beauty channel Wayne Goss, makeup artist. Adore him. And John McClane, of course, love him. Super entertaining. And then, yeah, random things. There's a show. I don't know. People would, I probably really confuse the Google algorithm with all of my search results because my YouTube channel is all over the place from the stuff that I like to watch. I'll go from like Wayne Goss or Jeffree Star or whatever to Neil deGrasse Tyson to uh, Star Trek to you name it. Uh, yes, Jennifer says, "Oh, and the Tati and James Charles thing was so dumb, but hard to look away from too." Yes, I agree. I agree. Yeah, it's all just yeah, complete wild entertainment kind of stuff. Just very different. Yes, I agree. Flavor Pro says, "I do love Jenna Marbles and her boyfriend Julian. I've been watching her since like her first year." Yes, she was great. And Kevin says, "I'm going to go watch the Joe Rogan and John Carmack interview after this." Yeah, I watch a lot of Joe Rogan too. I enjoy him. Trying to think. I've been obsessed with um, Amber Lynn Reed. If you guys are familiar with her channel, I don't know. I I don't even know really why I watch her channel. As part of it is, it's not even about, I guess it's more about watching her mindset at work and then watching the people in the comments. And I've thought about making some like video responses to some, of course I would do it in a supportive, um, you know, loving way. I wouldn't want to just, be mean, but I don't know. I think she's a very kind of fragile person in a lot of ways. And I mean, who wouldn't be in her situation, frankly? I don't want to contribute to causing her any more stress than she has in her life, but I've thought about making some videos, I don't know, to kind of talk about her challenges in a different light. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, Ab says I don't watch Amberlynn's channel, but I hope she finds a way to lose weight. Yeah, Nikki says, yeah, it's hard to watch her anymore. It's so sad. Yeah, I agree. It's food addiction is really, I can't even imagine having a food addiction at that level. It's just got to be so difficult. I heard something a while back. I don't remember who said it, but I thought it was so well said about food addiction. And they said, addiction of any kind, it's like having a wild tiger. And with addiction, with alcohol or drugs, you take that wild tiger and you're able to put it into a cage, and it's always there. And it's there, and like how to interact with it and how to stay away from it, basically. But with food addiction, it's that same wild tiger, but you have to take it out and walk it. You have to take it out and walk it 3 times a day. And I thought that's so true. It's just got to be so difficult to have a food addiction. Shelby asks, have you seen Eugenia Cooney? I have. She's back. I haven't. I've seen one of her, part of one of her videos since she came back from rehab, eating disorder, I'm guessing, rehab. So I'm glad that she's still alive. I was really concerned about her for a while. And yeah, Jill says, yeah, I'm praying for Eugenia. I agree. I think she's got a lot of stuff going on in her life, and I hope she gets it sorted out as well. It's just, your heart breaks for people that with addiction, at least for me, like addiction of any kind. I think it's just so hard to go to battle every single day, but with food addiction, whether it's extreme, like, binge eating or food addiction of any kind, or the opposite, where you just have the anorexia or bulimia, where there's this almost fear of food, your heart just breaks, because what a hard way to live, Jack says, I'm recovering from binge eating disorder. Men generally do not discuss such things, which makes it hard. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of major stuff that guys don't discuss because it's just never been necessarily deemed as appropriate, I guess, or encouraged. And that's got to be incredibly difficult too. I can't imagine. Same thing with anorexia in men. It's these things go, excuse me, they often fly under the radar because so many people just think, oh, well, anorexia is just something that women struggle with, or, or same with binge eating disorder, that men somehow don't have these problems, or that men don't struggle with anxiety or depression, or that they're not abused, or all kinds of things. And that's another very valid point, Jack. He says, and more importantly, we're expected to discuss it like women do, and many of us just don't. That is very well said. And it would be fantastic. Another thesis for somebody out there, somebody's looking to do a good research project, would be to also dive into that. Would be the differences. There's talk about different cultural differences between people, and developing like a cultural competency when it comes to therapy and working with people. But I would love to see some more research done on kind of different personality styles, or the differences between um, men and women, and in therapy, and what are some techniques that tend to work better. So yeah, that would really be a great study, because I know when I was in this last class I was taking for it was my practicum class, which was really interesting because we all had clients and we were able to watch other students work with clients. And one of the things that I had noticed with, I would say, pretty much all of the male clients that came in was, I think in general, people don't know what they're supposed to do in therapy. And so they tend to look towards the therapist to kind of guide the session. And I don't know, I just think there's a lot of things that go uncommunicated that everybody would be better off if these expectations and ground, I don't know, I won't say ground rules, but kind of the approach, I guess, the flow of the session was more discussed ahead of time, and there was more of this team approach with, this is how I do things, and I encourage you to hop in or to ask questions or disagree, or this is you, this is all for you, this time together. So encouraging more of that feedback from clients, because actually I was in a class tonight and we were talking about that, more of a kind of quote unquote resistant clients who might come in and they sit there and they don't say anything, especially ones that might be court appointed, that'll just sit there for the whole 50 minutes and not say anything. And everybody was saying, oh, well, they're very resistant. And we learned that they were shut down and that they were angry and that they didn't want to be there. And I said, well, maybe that's true, but maybe they also don't know what to say. And they're waiting for the therapist to lead the session, because most people aren't comfortable with, hey, I just met you. I don't want to say things. If I'm going to open up to you, I don't know where to start, and I don't know what's appropriate, and I don't want to tell you too much and cross the line. Like, I don't know where the lines are. I don't know where the expectations are. So things like that, especially with people that aren't used to talking about their emotions or traumatic things in their life. Yeah, and that's a great point, Dan. He says, as a man, I feel free discussing anything. I just don't want to have it used against me later on. Yeah, but I think too, having that be said, having some ground rules, especially if there's couples counseling going on, to have these expectations of, okay, what the goal here isn't to weaponize the relationship, right? It's to work towards a solution and to get the stuff out on the table so you can work through it. But here's some ground rules. There's no, it's okay to have hurt feelings, but it's not okay to become intimidating or withdrawn or abusive to the other person. It's if there's something that's said in therapy, especially if it's, well, really anything, but especially if it's something hurtful, it's not to be used against that person at the next confrontation or the next, well, ever, but whenever you're trying to get your way or make a point. Communication shouldn't be about trying to win or to crush somebody else if there's some sort of disagreement. Making this kind of stuff clear, because I really feel like people just don't know. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard to enforce boundaries when you don't know when you're being mistreated. And it's hard to enforce boundaries when you feel like you somehow deserve to be mistreated, or that you caused it, or that you're making too big of a deal out of it, or uh, all of this stuff. So, okay, let's see here. Kevin says, I've been abused by a woman. As a man, bringing it up yields poor results more often than not. I've even had friends get angry from me for mentioning it. I think that's very common, especially for men. Even I will say though, even with women, other people tend to become very defensive and they get upset because they don't understand the dynamics. And they'll say insensitive things like, well, but you stayed. And, um, if you didn't like being treated like that, then you should have left. And of course, I think we all know it's not that simple, especially if you're in a relation, especially when there's trauma bonds present, if you're married to the person, if there's children, if there's finances that are all, commingled and combined. It's a lot to sort out, plus the manipulation and, all of this. So there's oftentimes very little sympathy from other people because they just don't understand the manipulation that behind an abusive relationship. And so when people think of abuse, they think of kind of a bully. They think about what they see on TV, like a big bully roughing up a weaker, smaller kid, and that's not the case. There was actually a Joe Rogan episode I was listening to the other day, and I forget what it was even about, but they were talking about movies and bullies, and Joe was saying, man, I really hate that in movies, how they turn up bullying to like an 11, where there's this person going around, knocking people's lunch trays over and just being such a jerk about it and tripping people and, name calling and slamming a person into lockers and all of this stuff. And he said, do you think that it's possible that there's this whole generation out there of bullies that don't think that they're bullies because they don't do stuff like that, because they don't turn it up to an 11? And I I kept thinking during that time, I was like, yeah, absolutely. I absolutely think that there's a ton of bullies who don't think that they're bullies because they're not doing that stuff. And it's just like the same with abuse, where people have this idea of abuse being physical. And so if a woman is abusing a man in any way, shape, or form, it's this idea of, well, then you must have let it happen because you're bigger than her. So, well, why did you let that happen? But abuse is about power and control. It's not about gender and strength. You can have a little 5 foot tall woman. Uh, I don't know. I mean, if you guys have ever experienced this, or you guys have ever seen this, but um, you're a really dominating mother, for example, and she might have, I don't know, a handful of kids, sons, big sons that are all, I don't know, football players or hockey players, and she runs that household, and those boys do what they're told, and you know, it's really dominating like that. So, uh, yeah, there's lots of women out there that are, because men, the other people in their life know that there's going to be hell to pay if they don't do what she wants. Yeah, Kevin says, I don't agree with Joe about how he admires Conor McGregor, the MMA fighter. He's been called out on that recently. Yeah, I I don't know. I think his interest in or his support for Conor McGregor might be diminishing. I started off as a huge Conor McGregor fan too. When he first came out, I just thought, I really liked his. He was very, um, just motivated. He seemed like a really positive, goal-oriented dude, and I really liked his whole story, and was just, like, uh, hoped that he went far, and but his behavior has just become so out of control and horrific that, yeah, I don't support any of that anymore. Um, let's see. Jennifer says, yeah, I was bullied at every school I moved to before I moved to the US in high school. And it wasn't always an 11. It was mostly just being told really humiliating things and trying to psychologically manipulate me to think that no one liked me and I'll never be liked. Yeah. I, and that's the thing is if it can be so easy to take that stuff as truth when you have people that are continually telling you these hateful, hurtful things day in and day out, and they're just drilling it into your brain. And if it's just coming across as, well, no, this is just the truth. Like you're just an unlovable person, or they're just so horrible that damage is done. And it's so awful because a person can really struggle for decades to understand why they feel the way that they feel and why they're still so hurt by that, especially if there wasn't any pushing or shoving or outright name calling or yelling or any of this stuff. Dan, that would be cool. He says, I'm going to pull some strings to get you onto Rogan. That would be so fun. I would love to talk to Joe Rogan. I love everything he talks about. It's so interesting. Aliens and I don't know, you name it, everything under the sun. I enjoy his show. Okay, let me scroll up here. Pam says, I know a guy abused by his now ex-wife. It really messed with him. On one hand, he was being honorable by not fighting her back because he respected his mom, but he's put up with a lot from her, like his dad. Yeah. And I think that can be a skewed message that some men get because they're told, you should never hit a woman. Um, you know, I think a lot of men interpret this and I think society in general, it's this idea of if, if mama ain't happy, then no one's happy kind of thing. It's like the expectation of, well, you need to make her happy. So if she's abusive, then it's something that you did. You need to work harder to be a better husband or a better child kind of a thing. And that's not right or fair. Right. Um, or this expectation of, oh, this woman's hitting this guy or just verbally unleashing on him. He must have done something to deserve it. Whereas you wouldn't find that if a guy was yelling at a woman or hitting a woman, hopefully people would rush over and break it up. So there's definitely a double standard there, and it's a problem. I mean, we're so at the beginning stages of all of this, and hopefully in the next, gosh, within this next generation, it's going to become more known and more talked about, and um, just more light brought to it because there's so many misconceptions and stereotypes surrounding abuse. Let's see here. Let me scroll up. Zachary's saying Bob Lazar is completely insane, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm not sure what to believe about that, or a pathological liar, he says. Yeah. Roman, what do you want, buddy? Come on. What do you want? This little dog is staring at me crying. Oh, you're breaking my heart. Hold on. What? Do you want up? Do you want up? Come here. Come here. Come here. Oh, sit down. Little dog. Little dog. Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll down here. Nikki says, "Ah." Jennifer says, "Oh, puppy." Yes, this is Roman. He's a little chihuahua and he's adorable. Yes, he is so stinking cute. He's a little pork chop. Roman, me and you, buddy, need to start going for walks. Let's see. I'm scrolling up, scrolling up, scrolling up. Really, Jennifer says that she was equally bullied by guys and girls. Wow, I'm so sorry you went through that. Yeah, kids, Flavor Pro was saying, yeah, kids were horrible. Yeah, kids can be really horrible. They really can be. Yeah, thankfully now there's more. That kind of stuff is a lot less tolerated, which is, I think, becoming such a huge victory. Because I think for years it was almost seen as this weird rite of passage, that it'll kind of build character, and thankfully now people are seeing it as, no, this is really, really damaging, and this can impact somebody for the rest of their life, and adults need to step in and break this stuff up. Jennifer says, yes, no sense of belonging. Also part of my identity issues, I suppose. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But realizing that, we get to define who we want to be in this chapter of our life. And there's so much power in that. I struggled a long time too with finding my identity and really becoming comfortable in myself. And I still struggle with that, but I've become a lot more confident. I mean, boy, any negative comment from somebody would really derail me. And I just took things so deeply personal, and, my self-esteem was just really not there. And I remember being, I was young, probably preteen, like 12, 11, 12, 13, around those ages. And seeing Cosmo or those teen magazines, and that would say like, well, which style are you? Are you, sleek and sexy? Are you, a hippie? Are you a cowgirl? And I just didn't know. because I liked so much about so many different things that I couldn't just pigeonhole myself into a certain type of thing. And that just caused me so much anxiety for so long, because it was like, well, who am I feel like I'm a mix of things. And I don't know. I struggled. So I hear you. I hear you. Yep, I did too, Jennifer. She says, yes, I collected those sorts of teen magazines, I guess as a way to figure out what I liked and didn't like. Yep. Yeah, me too. And I think for me, it was more also of trying to get clear on who I was. Of like, well, if I really like this, then, uh, what does that mean? Like, how am I supposed to look? It's just sad, just so lost, so lost, and so impressionable. Let's see here. Liz says, I'm having a hard time finding a therapist for myself and my teenage daughters that can address the trauma of a narcissistic father. I want them to break the cycle of our cluster B family history. One of the books that I'm working on right now has to do with basically just that, like what healing from narcissistic abuse really means. And it's not just like what breaking the cycle of abuse really means, because it means a lot more than what I think most people, myself included, way back when, originally think or thought that it means. So it's it's basically all about rediscovering yourself. There's multiple parts to it. There's dealing with a lot of the complex post-traumatic stress disorder that goes along with it, that can go along with it. And then there's also really discovering who you are. So hopefully that book will be out in the next few months. I'll mention something to you guys when it is. But that book is more of a guideline of, these are like some of the top, and I'm still fiddling around at the order of the book and how I'm going to do all that. But like the top lessons, I guess, or like milestones or checkpoints, however you want to say it, that I feel that everybody needs to at least just check with themselves to see, okay, how am I doing in this one area? Because this kind of stuff, it's all subconscious. And, we're oftentimes not aware of that there's any imbalance in certain areas of our life, because especially if there hasn't really been any problems in those certain areas. So it can really be, or problems or certain things that we're doing, or personality traits or mindset patterns that we have that are causing problems, but we're not aware that they're causing problems or contributing to it. So, Jennifer, and I like what you have to say about that. I agree. I wish there was more of that as well. She says, I kind of get that it's something hard for schools to control as far as bullying. She says, I don't really expect bullying to go away. I just wish I had a better way to deal with it. Like if I was taught I was worth it or something. Yeah. I think that kind of stuff, teaching resiliency and healthy self-esteem is, I think, a big part of the solution, because we don't have control over other people and we don't have control over the different situations in life. Like life is about pain. It is. There's a lot of things, painful events that we go through in life. But I think there would be a consistently positive outcome if there was more education, like psychoeducation, done on teaching resiliency and just literally defining like what this is and giving people the tools to overcome. Because right now, what we do is this stuff's not really taught, and it's not really role modeled. And so nobody talks about this because a lot of these topics are kind of seen as taboo because most people aren't comfortable sharing their deep dark emotions. And so what happens is nobody talks about anything. And then when somebody experiences a lot of pain, whether it's death, loss, grief, abuse, whatever it might be, they wait until they can't handle it anymore, and then they start seeking help. And I just feel like there's got to be a better way. Like we don't need to wait. If we could be more proactive as a society and teach a lot of these skills and a lot of these kind of like a healthier, more empowered way for people to be, it would just set people up to succeed. So, I'll have to check out that book. Flavor Pro says there's a book called Coping with Trauma-Related Disassociation. It's skills training for patients and therapists, and it's by Suzette Boone. So this is an amazing book. I'm going to copy and paste that into Amazon. I'm going to add it to my hoard of books that I get from them. I love it. Like, you're in the right field when you look forward to buying books like that and you just devour them. I'm sure everybody around me just thinks I'm so weird, but I just find this fascinating. Cad asks, can I send you money through PayPal? Oh gosh, I appreciate that, and I'm sure you could. I don't even know how to do that, and um, it's really not necessary. I do these live streams because I love doing it, and it's just my way of giving back. Um, so I, yeah, I'm glad that you guys are here, and um, yeah. So I don't know. This might sound really weird. I'd much rather you guys take any money that you'd want to just donate to me and go do something. Here's what I would like. I would love for you to go do some sort of act of self-care and then come tell us about it on the live stream the next week. That would be awesome. I would love that. So we are at the time where it's time to do our guided meditation for the evening. So if you are at a place where you can get comfortable, whether that's sitting down or lying down, and um, just allowing this to be your time to unwind, go ahead and take a moment to find a position that's comfortable. Allow yourself to just breathe. Just kind of shake off the day, the week, the month, the year, letting all of that stress and tension go. Just focusing on your breathing. being fully present in this moment, noticing the temperature of the air around you, the sounds that you hear around you. The feel of your chest as it rises and falls with each breath. Noticing the heaviness that begins to take over your body as you begin to relax. Beginning to feel comfortable in this moment, knowing that you in this moment are safe and secure, and that there is so much that is right about you and that is right about this moment. And allowing each breath to travel further down to the bases of your lungs, into your stomach, down into your hips and your legs, seeing if you can send that breath all the way down into the tips of your toes, allowing your whole body to rise and fall with each inhale and exhale. Taking a few moments to acknowledge some things that you're thankful and grateful for the resiliency that you do have, for your dedication to personal growth, for the strength and courage you do have, for how far you've come, for all of the insights you've gained, for all of the self-awareness that you've gained. There truly is so much that is right with you. There really, really is. And allowing that feeling of just acknowledgement and appreciation of the different traits that you have that are working in your favor. Just taking some time to acknowledge that and giving yourself that validation and appreciation, and perhaps visualizing giving yourself just a big hug and just saying thank you for being the warrior that you are and continuing to move forward, even when moving forward can be scary and difficult. Continuing to breathe. Let's take some time now to connect and acknowledge and appreciate perhaps other people that are here in the chat tonight. Just sending some light and love their way. people here from all over the globe. Just letting them know that they matter and that you can see so many of the things about them as well that are good and right with them. Sending that, just that beautiful restorative energy out their way. Whether you'd like to do that through a prayer or through visualizing a kind of a cord of energy going from you to them, or just kind of energy going out into the world, however you want to visualize that. Realizing that we're connecting to so much power out there, so much beauty out there. Just that force of things that are good and restorative and healing. And the beauty of people that can just meet online and support each other. What an amazing time to be alive. And what an amazing gift that you guys give each other every week. It's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful to see people being able to come together and support each other, even though they're struggling with their own pain. I think it just speaks volumes about you guys. So I hope you can start to feel that sensation of all of that light and love coming at you from all different angles, from all across the globe. Feeling it tingling in your body. As that energy moves through you, restoring and healing you, connecting you to everything that is good and right. Feeling that light move down your arms and into your fingertips, up your neck, all the way up to the top of your forehead, all the way down your chest and your hips, your back, down your legs, into the tips of your toes. Knowing that that energy is touching every single cell on its way around your body, restoring your cells. Feeling the pulsing of that energy as it moves through your body. Again, connecting you to everything that is good and right in the world and everything that is good and right within you. And there truly is a lot that is right about you. And when you're ready, come on back and open your eyes. So, thank you, everybody, so much for being here tonight. Book club is tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The book we're going to be discussing is called True Refuge by Tara Brach. So I will be curious for the discussion and to see if you guys have read it, what you think about it. So, as always, lots of love to you guys. Um, you are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can move forward and heal from this. So, just lots of love to you guys. Take care, and I will see you tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. Good night.